My name's Emma Joyce. I'm the Executive Director at GDF, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce this panel, which is Mobilizing Crypto for Impact. So if I could ask my panelists to come to the stage, please. So today we will be looking at mobilizing crypto for impact and what, if any, progress has been made to date. We'll be exploring that. So I'm now going to hand over to the panelists. So if I start with Bernhard and ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bernhard Kotwatsch. I'm the head of the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator. So what we're doing is we're identifying, supporting, and scaling disruptive startups that can help us end global hunger. And part of that is also with blockchain and crypto. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernhard. And Mike, could I ask you to go next?
Sure. My name is Mike Hofer. I'm Chief Banking Officer at BCP Group. We are, as I learned earlier, industry, not education. So we're in this to make money, but also we're in there to do the right thing. So we're enabling most crypto companies who can't get banked to be banked and do their good work out there in the industry.
Wonderful, thank you, Mike. And over to Mihaela, who will introduce herself and also our topic
today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. So I noticed that, yes, of course, gentlemen first, because you are in charge. So now it's our turn to affirm ourselves. Yes, my position is called, and it's a dream job, I assume, for everybody. It's Strategic Impact Leader. And what does that mean? So I'm a Strategic Impact Leader at Input Output, which are the developers of Cardano blockchain. In order to understand my job, I think we have to ask ourselves what means impact, right? And so impact, at least on my planet, on the Cardano planet, is related to a theory of change. I mean, what change do I want to effect in the world? And this change is actually manifold, and it is embedded in the technology which we are developing, which is a transformative technology, and I will explain this a bit later. But it is also expressed in the mission of our company, which is the virtual and virtuous rebuilding of the systems of the world through technology to enable people to take full control of their lives through economic identities. We endow them with these economic identities with the ability to participate in an ethical economy. And what does that mean? Of course, financial inclusion, helping those at the fringes, and also improving the systems which are current, yes, with the super infrastructure, which makes them more effective, more efficient.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So, if we look at the UN, they have 17 Sustainable Development Goals, that aim to transform our world. Can crypto help us reach those goals at all, especially in financial inclusion? What progress has been made to date in financial inclusion? Mike, could I start with you, please?
Yes, so it depends on which way you look at this. Progress being has inclusion improved compared to where we stood with TradFi, what we call traditional finance, and there are a few projects out there who are rolling out say crypto-based financial instruments to people who are unbanked, be it in controlled environments we're going to hear in a moment from Bernhard, or also in economies where there hasn't been any safe reliance on the government's financial infrastructure. I think that the key there is that with TradFi rules coming more and more into play with what we call this inclusion move, we'll see more and more of those opportunities go away. So there is kind of a danger that will become just another banking rail or another banking infrastructure that people couldn't participate in the first time. So we need to make sure that we keep this at a granular level where it's independent of state actors and of central banks. And I know that's not very popular, but in terms of getting the goal done, we've had 200 years of central banking, and it hasn't worked. So maybe we need to do something different.
Okay, thank you, Mihaela. What do you think?
Yes, so this is actually, in this regard, as I was mentioning, our technology can be considered to be an existential technology, and I will give two examples. So a small farmer in Africa, yes, we work with Bezesha, for example, which is in Ghana, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in other countries. Let's say they want, they need the credit, but the bank, they don't have a bank account. They want to order from a supplier. Well, they can now order from a supplier. The supplier is paid by Bezesha from funds which are given by investors and other supporters of that kind of business, for example, organic fruit and vegetables. And then the supplier gives to the merchant the produce. Once the merchant sells the produce, they pay through a smart contract the Bezesha back. And in this way, they get credit. So without having a bank account, this wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So we are creating new financial and economic models. I have another example, which is the Rohingya population. Yes, they are stateless, they have no rights, they cannot get a bank account, they don't have even identities. We give them identities, and in a similar manner, of course, credit scores and so on, and reputation, based on which they can start a life. I can talk more about that, but not necessarily related to financial inclusion. I mean, we have a learn and earn program for them, in which we reward them for taking the time which they would otherwise need to work hard at the black market to feed their families. We reward them for learning and being able to become productive members of society. There's much more.
Well, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, just sticking with that for just 1 minute more, what percentage of that...
With which one?
With Rohingya, the population, what percentage of that population have access to that? Do we know? Like, is it very small, or is it tiny?
We actually do not know. It's very small. Why? We are working with the Rohingyas, which are outside of Myanmar and Burma. Yes, so they actually immigrated, still stateless, no state approves them, and so...
Bernhard.
So, which I guess just adding to this, whereas on the one hand, to your question, how does it look like? If we look from 1990 to right now, we've made lots of progress, right? There's internet, there's smartphones, there's mobile money, there's lots of progress that has been made globally. Now, I guess the situation, and also why I'm passionate about it and why I'm here is so right now we have a catastrophe in front of us, which is getting worse and worse by the day. Also because of the war in Ukraine, we're seeing now the food price and fuel price. Food price have increased by over 50% in recent months. So we see that that impacts some of the poorest of the poor, which is why crypto. It's not only financial inclusion, but also other things are super important. And then just maybe to add to the example, so we as World Food Program, for instance, 10 years ago, about 2% of the aid that we've been providing was cash or bank transfers to people. Right now, it's over 35%. So we are reaching, as World Food Program in the United Nations, it's the 100% funded by donations. Right now, about 130 million people in 120 countries and territories. And last year, so it was 35% of our aid was actually cash transfers. So also, now, that was about $2.7 billion already of cash that goes to people. They spend in shops, and then it also supports the local economy. Now, it's not always that they actually then have a long-term financial inclusion. I mean, we help put the infrastructure in place, which is one of the requirements. The other thing is they need bank accounts, or they need other means of actually having, ideally, a longer-term financial access, which crypto could play a role.
In giving them credit, as I explained in the beginning. And it's not only poor, but also disenfranchised. So to include them, yes, you need an infrastructure, and that is what we are creating, both with self-sovereign identities and with our wallets. And it is not an easy road. I also, in many other regards, although you didn't ask us about challenges yet, however, given what he mentioned, because a big question is...
It's interactive here.
Yes. Who is paying for this, right? I mean, it's the government, it's the United Nations, it's the company which is developing the technology. We do not have an answer yet, and we do not have this kind of collaboration and partnership yet in place to have a structure. Who is going to fund a project such as this one? Okay. So it's a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernhard, back to you, and I know we've touched on it briefly, but can you expand a bit on what the benefits of a blockchain-based system offer when talking about delivering aid?
So, I mean, one example, and we've been using blockchain actually so that refugees can go into stores and purchase food. The basic premise of why we've started using that is collaboration among aid agencies and better service to people. And like part of the issue is a little bit like, so to a certain extent, like there's actually reason for that, because like World Food Program provides cash or so that people can purchase food. There's other agencies that provide like, soap or shelter or like education. So like, it wouldn't make sense that every organization does everything because there would be complete chaos, right? At the same time, if I'm the refugee sitting there, like, how do I make sure that I'm not running around with 5 cash cards at a certain point? So this is where blockchain, like the basic premise of this building block system was, how can we better collaborate? So it's not my blockchain, your blockchain, it's the neutral blockchain network, right? So we started doing this actually as a pilot with 100 people in Pakistan, then 10,000 people in Jordan. Right now, we are using this like 500,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan, 500,000 Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, who can go in stores and purchase food. They shop for the groceries and then essentially they pay with the blockchain wallet. I mean, in that particular case, we still settled the last transaction in fiat currency because that's what we've agreed with the central bank and the finance ministry, but it could be full crypto also, right? Now, right now, as I said, it's like used by 1 million people and we've transferred almost $400 million using that system to people already. And it's better collaboration.
Yes.
We save bank fees, with like 98% of the banking fees, and it's a better service for the people because now they actually have something like that they could use longer term. I have other examples also, but like I'll stop here.
It's not just that. Sorry, it's not just that. I mean, yes, that the last mile is maybe still some cash because that the blockchain doesn't reach that end now. But as a much more important step, I think it's the step away from purely government controlled and financial systems controlled rails, because you would not have the people trust you with something that they actually flee, particularly in the case of refugees. So the trust goes into the blockchain and away from an organization or from a state, which I think is a massive step forward.
And that is definitely, yes, finally the mission of blockchain fulfilled, yes, that it is a trust technology. But also you can track where the money is going, yes, which I think is kind of critical for the aid organizations, that it is actually doing what they intend to do.
Okay. Fantastic, thank you. Mike, we're obviously seeing, with the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, an outpouring of support from the crypto community. How can we, mobilize that support for future, situations?
I think it's here to stay. It's a permanent build-up of an infrastructure that is blockchain-based because, again, you have no single actors who can then control or block particular transactions, which is key in terms of crisis. But also, it's if you look at what El Salvador has done as one of the most prominent examples, to choose a blockchain-based currency not in their control as their home currency. So if you create that layer of non-national financial system, I think makes it much more global, much more quicker to engage, and it's there already. You don't have to start building shops, acceptance points. You don't have to build a financial infrastructure first before you can actually use it when the crisis is maybe not over, but has worsened, but you can use it from day one.
And regarding the Ukrainian, last night, besides my other work in this regard, last night I was at the SDG 17 goal dinner, which was called Unlikely Alliances. So we had the Bank of America talk to the Minister of Finance of Italy and the Minister of Infrastructure, they featured a Ukrainian leader, a young global leader who has taken the initiative when the war started to set up an online platform for education. And this is just, so important because it extends to the refugees from Ukraine. And, for example, a gentleman from another country, he said, yes, we are supporting the platform and offering education for free for these children. So it is indeed, we use blockchain in much the same manner. I mean, they use blockchain in much the same manner as I mentioned with the Rohingya refugees, because you need educational credentials. Yes, how do you do not have the school to print the diploma. You have to put it on blockchain, so it is verified and all that.
That's a brilliant
And the grades
example,
and so on.
I think, of a fantastic use. Bernhard, sticking with Ukraine, are you seeing, we've obviously seen a huge, support, in using crypto. Do you see that going forward, and is that helpful in using crypto for other causes?
I mean, most definitely. And I think part of that is also that it becomes a lot more mainstream. It becomes used, and it's accelerating that development. So, what we've seen, with the Ukraine in particular, just from one day to the next, that the donations that have been made in crypto, I think this is very encouraging. And maybe, I'm not sure if, before I started our Accelerator, I co-founded an app that's called Share the Meal, which is people can, one tap on a phone can donate 80 cents. 80 cents feeds a child for a day. So it's kind of micro fundraising. Basic premise, same thing. Now is if I can get more people into this, the consciousness, I want to contribute something. Maybe it's something that you want to share. There's something you want. I can only say I look at this on the one hand, with horror at the situation that's happening. On the other hand, is seeing the empathy, all the people who actually want to do something. I think I really also it's a heartfelt thank you for everybody who is stepping up and wants to do something, right?
And if I may add to this, our CEO, Charles Hoskinson, took the C-suite, me included, to the border, the Przemysl border of Ukraine, Poland. And we met with NGOs. They just crossed the border for one day. And because we really want to donate to the right NGOs, that there's also, we identified a lot of human trafficking, fake NGOs, and so on. So blockchain can help here as well. And so we are pledging this kind of support, but also we had the opportunity to visit the tents and see them actually crossing the border with families. I just cannot continue speaking because, I'm going.
But just to say, I think so. Some of the things, the developments that we're seeing also, it's just accelerated, right? Yes, we actually, as World Food Program, we actually worked on setting up our own crypto fund to accept donations prior to what happened in Ukraine, and we are going to launch in the next couple of weeks. But it's something that, yes, of course, we see a lot of more acceleration, a lot of more people who get into this because they now also can see how technology and innovation can contribute towards a better world.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's if you look at Ukraine, very simple. Have you tried sending money to the Ukraine in the past 4 weeks? There's no way. And if you want to help support families, or if you want to send money back to your family or your relatives, you have no other way than using crypto.
Agreed. Yes, that's why we flew there.
Okay, thank you so much. Mike, I'm going to go actually back to financial inclusion now, because I want to take a look at CBDCs and understand, what if they will help with financial inclusion, or what do you think really, particularly around CBDCs, if we think they will have a positive impact or not?
Let me ask the audience, who thinks CBDCs, so central bank issued digital currencies, are good? Who thinks they're bad? You're right. Sorry, no. No, it's a double-edged sword. It's obviously it's a means to an end. I think CBDC has a lot of the qualities that central bank issued money has. So it's got the trust of the government. It's got controllability when it comes to economic steering, inflation control, and whatever have you. But also it has a very dangerous feature, which is the programmability. So who wants money that can be turned off, or can be restricted to a specific area? I'm not mentioning any authoritarian regimes here, but if the technology is there, I am mentioning authoritarian regimes. Yes, but the question is, how do you trust them to not starting using actually these programmable features?
It's the worst of both fiat and crypto.
Pretty much, yeah.
You provoked everyone, you realize, yes.
Well, they needed to wake up. So, does that answer your question? CBDCs.
I can take on.
Yeah, okay.
I have no doubt.
You know I raised my hand at the no. So yeah, besides the social credit and all this other evil that can be easily embedded, and it is actually embedded in it, The opposite is happening with blockchain. And I will give an example. It is an attempt which it is still in the works because of because of the established financial system, which is not yet ready to accept that innovation. And that is, we are working with the government of the Marshall Islands on the creation of the sovereign. And that is a currency which is a fiat currency. However, it is not a CBDC. The government is not in control. So it is being released by a foundation in collaboration with the government, in a collaboration like with entities similar with what you see on this panel. And it is programmable money. You embed the good in the money, and the board, this kind of council, is deciding together with the people and the parliament what rules go into the money design. It has a 4% money supply, and every year that supply is going towards a climate fund, towards a health fund, and so on and so forth, as decided with the people, not necessarily only by those from the representatives and so on and so forth. So there are models and ways, and many on my planet believe, when we call that Cardano nation, for example, but we can call it crypto nation. We believe that it is time to change the way in which the financial system works, including how money is designed, and we have the technology for that.
Yeah, but there's so much potential for abuse, and there's many ways you can design a CBDC, and I may have been a little bit black and white before that. But is it hosted with wallets with the central bank? Would you allow money to flow through to commercial banks?
No.
And so on and so forth.
It's a foundation, I repeat.
Or a foundation, yes. So there's many models, and some are more prone to abuse by authoritarian regimes than others. But if you think back of why Bitcoin was created, was exactly that. It was taking money as a means of payment out of the hands of the central banks. And if we go back to that spirit, then I think CBDCs have way more danger, way more downside potential than upside opportunity.
So maybe just to broaden this in terms of because if you want the principle is so we help some of the most vulnerable people on the planet. So part of the principle is okay, so how do we leave no one behind, which is one thing. How do we spread financial inclusion, right? And this is where I guess maybe it's not CBDCs, but there's also we always have to think about on the one hand, everybody's getting excited about crypto when prices are rising, but if you're dealing with some of the most vulnerable people, how do you make sure that they are not exposed to the downward risks also? This is where maybe I think stable coins could play a role if they're working, right?
If they're stable.
If they're stable, exactly. Now we've actually done an innovation project we call Impact, where we essentially train young people who've never used a computer before, do data cleaning, picture labeling and stuff like that. So people who've previously been receiving food assistance from WFP, young people that now learn how to do micro work online, digital work. And part of why is the project not scaling as fast as it could? Because we don't have a financial inclusion. Most of those people don't have an identity. They don't fulfill the KYC requirements of traditional banks or anything. But, so we've actually now done a pilot in Kenya. So we have 13,000 graduates of the program by now. And we've just done a pilot in Kenya where we use Celo dollar stable coins to pay the poor people, they're living in a slum outside of Nairobi, and they receive the money in Celo dollars. And not only do they now have a wallet that's theirs, they can also use their income to prove that they have an income, they have a job, and they can borrow against it to get credit if they want to invest into something.
Exactly, and this is absolutely the model which you use with the Rohingya Learn and Earn, as well as we are in discussions with the San Francisco government to San Francisco city mayor, actually, which they want to rehabilitate people with criminal record. Yes, they are not going to be accepted into the old system that easily. So they use a similar program for that. It has many applications, and it's so needed, existential again.
Okay, fantastic. I love that. And we do have a couple more questions, but I wonder if we should just open up very quickly, especially on that topic, because I know you were quite engaged in that. Are there any questions before we move on the CBDCs? Okay.
Yeah, so I think one of the struggles that I see with the CBDCs is, obviously, even in this room full of blockchain people, we are split between whether we think it's good or bad. I think I see it as something that governments are going to find necessary in order to reconcile blockchains with their own systems. Even though I personally I'm not crazy on the idea. I'm curious what your thoughts are on if there's a middle ground there, or how we can make these two opposite sides of this opinion.
I just have one thing to say. I do not think the governments are there to reconcile. I do not think that. I think they are there to make the old system more effective, so it will deepen whatever is bad and hopefully accelerate whatever is good. But it's not going to reconcile, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it shouldn't. I think the way forward will be a certain percentage of central bank issued money will be electric. But I would think that is more bespoke to certain purposes, maybe to have that in closed circuits between banks, domestic banks, for interbank
Instant
payments.
settlements and stuff, but they are not after changing something.
Right, no, I agree, that's the problem, right? So then isn't there concern that they might go the opposite way and just regulate us out of getting to do what we want?
So
Totally.
it is interesting. So I'm generally, like, I guess, a technology optimist, and I believe in the good of people. So, like, I guess so.
Including governments?
So
They are
cannot
people.
comment on that.
I think that it's important to keep the dialogue going, and it's important that, like, there is initiative. Like, there's a good report by the World Economic Forum on that. So, like, where, like, if you can contribute to the discourse, if you actually can influence it to going into the right direction, I think there's lots of good potential. Now, I think the reality is going to lie in the future that we all don't know, and I think it's going to be good that we are careful, or, like, aware of that there's risks involved with stuff. Like, it's not just everything is going to be good. Like, there's, like, it's the same thing. Like, I would say I wouldn't vilify governments also, because, like, you do need them on board, because, like, if you don't have them on board, exactly, then you're going to ban all of it.
And I think what can help, and I repeat, that is not a CBDC model, is if you really design the rules in the money, programmable money, and then governments do not actually have that much power. It's like a sort of a Bitcoin, but a bit more elevated, yes, with identities and with, you can have AML and so on, but also you can have and keep your sovereignty.
It's non-CBDC.
Yeah.
Non-CBDC, yes, but it's still programmable money. Like, we can call it just like that. And that's why it's called the sovereign, right? I mean, it is centered around the people and their needs.
Regulation is an interesting point, and I'm glad you raised that, because it's also a very sore spot for most of the crypto industry, particularly because regulators sometimes really just don't understand what they should regulate and how. Luckily, we're in a country right now that has pretty early in the game realized how important clear and proper, simple regulation is. And we see other countries, the island where we're located with our head office, has a less lucky hand in doing so. and everything in between. The point to bring it back to what the impact is on the crypto industry, if you have weak regulators, or regulators that are unforeseeable, or unreasonable, then you leave the country, because you can.
And the landscape is ever changes, yes. I mean, Switzerland is one of the leaders in the world right now. I don't want to give names, but other countries are also, and there is a race. So I'm just kind of throwing the challenge to governments to make it better.
No, I find it interesting, because we're touching about crypto again, and, like, how does it actually help us to get to impact. Like, I think we shouldn't look at this too narrow to just crypto use case. Like, if you look at blockchain use case, like, so we've been, as Accelerator, supporting some startups, non-profits, for-profit, digitized farm-to-fork transactions. Now, we do this because we want to increase the smallholder farmers' income, right? So they can improve, like, the sort of quality of the goods and so on. Now, it also is very interesting when you get into, like, well, you have a blockchain, is immutable, like you can prove that you have actually put in the, with sensor data in the soil, that you've actually treated the soil well and whatever. But then you think about like, smart contracts, you might get automatic payments. So like when you get into like, why is it useful? Why could you actually see like that you're leapfrogging certain development steps here? Because like there's certain things that you no longer will need. You no longer will need certain steps in there.
And this leads me to the ethical economy. I can now explain it with what he said in this context, yes, because you can measure the CO2 emissions of whatever processes you are involving, and also report on them. And the supply chains can be transparent, and that should be put in law, by the way, by governments. And in this way, you can have everyone harnessing the new economy. And what do I mean by this? We have to stop to look at nature as a commodity and as people and nature as capital and exploit them the best we can. And look at that holistically, like humans are integrated and they are part of nature, not integrated. Look at them as part of nature and transform the economy so towards regeneration and well-being of nature and human as part of nature. And this is possible exactly with what he said, with those sensors that measure and track and so on and so forth.
So you read Jason Hickel?
and Polanyi, by the way.
Okay.
Yes, who got the Nobel Prize for making the point that nature is not a commodity, if he needed to make this obvious point.
Can I just come back to that soil and sensor blockchain case? We're also, we're not just a commercial entity, we're also looking at making this world a better place, and we have pledged a certain share of our profit to sustainable projects. And one of the projects that we came across, which I think is really demonstrating the economic impact to emerging markets that the blockchain can have, is a startup that basically allows farmers, instead of chopping the trees to earn money from their land, to tokenize that patch of land and sell it as carbon offset. Because it becomes tradable. Once it's on the blockchain, it becomes tradable. And all of these, do we trust that the person has actually done this? Do we have proof? Yes, you do, because it's on the blockchain. It goes directly to what you were saying before.
Yes, and I just have to not only applaud this kind of application, that it wouldn't be possible without blockchain, but also to mention that it will save us from the Uberization of organics, which actually Amazon has done. And that is another example which without blockchain we cannot do. Because even the philanthropists, yes, and the rich people who want to put their money into making the world better, they do not have the infrastructure to put their money into the right thing, so they put their money into the old system. So we ended up with Whole Foods being now the Uber of organics, and don't get me started.
Well, that leads me very nicely on to the last question, actually, which is, do populations have the tech literacy, or do we have the existing infrastructure in place in order for industry to really make an impact on all the issues that we've been talking about today? Bernhard, can I start with you?
I mean, I guess because we are active in developing countries. We are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people. Like, I have to say, like, there's hope, right? Like, technology can actually help. Now you have, people use WhatsApp voice messages, and they can't read or write, right? So the same way they are using apps with pictures, maybe, and you can't read or write, or they're able to read or write something, right? Or there's young people that becomes like the one person in the village that has a smartphone. They become an entrepreneur and actually provide services to the rest of the community. I think there's lots, once there's a certain level of infrastructure in place, and internet connectivity is a basic requirement, I think you have lots of opportunity that you can get into that. Now, I think to the question there is okay, how far can you push it? I'm hopeful that it actually can be. I'm going to be even being here in Davos this week is so there's many more people who join in the conversation about blockchain and crypto who have no idea what they're talking about, and that's actually great. And the greatness of that is because who here knows how the technology behind emails work? And I'm okay.
Thanks for asking.
No, but the point is, most people who send emails do not know how that works. So, also users of blockchain or crypto do not know they do not need to know how that works. That makes me hopeful that in future, not only will it be a good thing for us in the world, but also some of the most vulnerable people.
Okay, it's very positive answer.
Speaking of the infrastructure, though, for us, we have a big office in Africa, and we know that in those kind of places is the need, yes. And being there, boots on the ground, we encountered a lot of difficulty with the infrastructure because people do not have smartphones. So we adapted our technology to stupid phones, let's call it this way. And we also, sometimes we have to use paper vouchers with the barcodes on them, and they are scanned by the merchant, not, people just bring them there, and so on and so forth. So we are in a stage where we have to bridge that, but entrepreneurs will find a way. Hopefully soon we will have that bridged.
Brilliant, thank you.
I think the technology is there. Because it's so low tech needed, and if you go to the analogy of the QR codes, what is a private key for a blockchain wallet? It's a QR code if you do it right, or it's a sequence of numbers. So it's not that hard. That can be transmitted over existing technological platforms. I think it's more a behavioral and acceptance issue. Technology is there as soon as there's acceptance and trust in those means of payment and the transaction, whatever they may be, blockchain or not. Blockchain obviously helps with it. That's when mass adoption will come.
Thank you. I'm going to open up again to questions.
Yeah, so I think what you guys are talking about is very important and very true, and yet the fragmentation of the industry lessens the impact of possible industry, and not just the industry, the whole space. So, for example, I work with Telos blockchain. We do a lot of projects in Africa, or more to the point, people build on Telos, do a lot of projects in Africa. We have Hofer, which is using blockchain to look at NGO aid and incentivize people to send after aid data, right? That improves that. We are Congo Weather is bringing weather forecasts to Western Africa for the first time in history, regular 12-hour weather forecasts. They don't have them, they have 1-hour forecasts. And there's all kinds of projects where, we could be working together, but Cardano and Telos are ostensibly, competitors as Layer 1 smart contract platforms, and yet I know that
we are open to collaboration.
You want to do this, and we want to do this, and how are we working together? Why can't we get to you?
He throws that love to me.
No, but I have to say thank you to GBBC for having us. Right? No, but the other thing is I'm actually quite hopeful, because I am meeting lots of people who are also in the crypto space. They're saying well, they acknowledge that you have to have essentially rails talking to each other, right? And I think that's going to be one of the solutions, where it's if you're saying it has to be just on mine and it has to be exclusive, then we're also going to say no. But so of course, as I was saying, we use Celo dollars, we've been using Ethereum, we've been using other blockchains, so it's not exclusive.
And we do not develop only on Cardano, by the way, as the input-output. Yes, we have other blockchains, Ergo, and so on and so forth, and we are open. We built an ERC20 converter to enable, both ways, and so on and so forth. So we have to talk. And here also I heard from other blockchains, like, for example, Hedera, which is doing amazing work on impact. And I'm in touch with them now. I want to work together and to collaborate. I think we definitely, for impact, we have to bring our forces together. So thank you for this.
I hope we can talk after this.
Absolutely.
Should we take one more question?
I'm just giving you the ground reality which I faced when I was making the traceability. I'm not a tech guy. I'm like that email guy who sends email. So I look for an off-the-block solution who I can use to track it. The problems are real, right? There was no electricity. There was no internet. There are no even, forget about stupid phones. There are not even phones, right? And on top of it, these commodities need certain certification to be brought to Europe. This tracking is not giving that. Even if I track, I can't bring those commodities into Europe. So there is a lot of, troubles which I'm facing. And for instance, I have I have 30,000 farmers who want to be on the blockchain, but if someone has some solution, I'll give you access to 30,000 farmers tomorrow.
Yes.
Right? But I tried it. We are far from reality. That's my ground reality. Yeah?
Thank you. And I just want to take one from here.
And by the way, I applied for the World Food Program Accelerator program. Yeah.
And what was the result? I will take this first. Yes. What was the result? Okay. So I wanted to say just one thing in the context of Davos here. On the first evening, I was invited at the SDG tent at a dinner, which was called Averting a Hurricane of Hunger. And the conclusion was that the only way to do it is to support the small farmers. At my table, it just happened. I think, the chairman of the Small Farmers Association in South Africa, who spoke on our behalf in the end, but he presented this. He said, we need decent living conditions for the farmers in the first place. That's exactly the point which you are making. Exactly. So, and I think maybe here UN can help, but we definitely are ready to come and support you with the technology and also pay for its implementation if the UN cannot raise the funds or others.
No, and maybe just to, like, as an accelerator. So right now we are looking, like, every 3 months we get about like 700, 800 applications globally. We also do pipeline sharing with, you know, other accelerators, investors and stuff like that. So we're open for-profit startups, non-profit startups. Then typically we select the 10 best teams globally, wherever they're coming from, that are implementing in developing countries. Now, typically, like about 70% of our applications come from Africa, which is good. Like, however, like what I just said, like we select 10 out of 800. So so right now we select 30 in our early stage program. It's 30 startups or nonprofit innovations. In the scale-up program, it's even less. I'm running around essentially raising cash, so like what brings me also. But like, so do I believe that, do I have a value judgment of whether you do is good or bad? No. It's like, I can tell you that we're trying to find the best teams and the ones that are more advanced, which is unfair to you, right?
I have a question. Just a second. I have a question. So who is deciding? Who is we? And you don't have to answer right now. I just have to say that we have a better model when it works as our Cardano community. Yes, we have a treasury, which is pretty big, right? So you would send your proposal to the Catalyst Fund, and the community will actually decide to fund you. Yes, we are implementing. That is input-output. We are the developers of Cardano. But I think Tezos is not the best. Apologies to everyone. But because they are not the developers, right? We are developers. I'm a professor of computer science. Yes, I know how the internet works. Try me. And all our team is like that. Definitely, we will talk at the end, but the question still remains, yes, who is deciding at the UN? And is it deciding based on the need as well as the technical, or in, you know, it is pretty a pretty complex thing, and I also am...
That's why
yes.
Maybe you thought I had money already and you could put me out already from there.
Okay. Bernhard, did you want to quickly answer that?
No, I mean, like the simple answer is like, you know, we operate as any other private sector accelerator or any VC or any angel investor. Like, it's based on, we're trying to have knowledge about, technology, people on the ground. We look at, like, first stage paper. Typically we then invite the teams to our innovation bootcamp, and then with a pitch event, then we give the teams that were in the innovation bootcamp up to $100,000 of equity-free funding, support to our team, and connections to field offices. Now, what we have, and which I call my secret superpower, is like, I'm not Bernhard's accelerator, I'm the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator. So everything that's being sent to us, we're always double-checking with our colleagues on the ground who work with the communities, who work with the government, who work with like a business there, to actually check, like, are you excited about this? Is this solving a real problem? Now, it's never going to be perfect, but like...
But it will be perfect, and I'm telling you why. Because we are changing the models of governance. This is an issue which we did not address here. Yeah. And we are changing the models of governance also for treasuries and for funds. Yeah. And this is what our Catalyst project is doing. Probably is not the topic of this panel, but I just tell you, so how we decide is different. And I will send you our white paper because there's no time. I realize I sense the pressure coming from the moderator. But it will be perfect and perfected because it's not a big organization or a government deciding. It's a community from the bottom up through that kind of self-governing DAO, which we all dream of, and which can be evolving, ever evolving, through smart contracts and adaptivity. Wonderful. Adaptive risk management, however you want to call it. But we call it socio-technical combinatorics, and that is part of my research as a former academic as well. Okay. The science is there. We just have to change the entrenched systems.
Thank you so much. So what an important, subject. I'm absolutely honoured to have moderated a panel with such esteemed panellists. Thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.